The trade deadline has come and gone. And if you're a fan of the NBA, how much fun was that? I mean, from the time that you woke up all the way through 3 p.m., you're on Twitter, you're refreshing, going through the timelines, waiting for the next Woj bomb. And I mean, of course, the story of the day was, the Cavs going from dead team walking to all of a sudden younger, more athletic, more exciting. They jettison 6 disgruntled veterans and their own draft pick and get 4 pieces in return who are going to be big, big helps. I mean, the 2 pieces from the Lakers, Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance. George Hill, also a big get for them. They send Dwayne Wade to Miami. But, again, it's fun. We're all sitting there watching, Adrian Wojnarowski put out news bit after news bit. Cavs basically reshaping their entire roster within the span of 45 minutes. I mean, your head is spinning watching all these big names come, go. And I mean, again, we all joke about LeBron being the GM and how in a span of 45 minutes, he turned his own team into an Eastern title contender. Not to say that they weren't before, the trade deadline, but you saw the posture of that team. You saw, and we've seen this before out of LeBron teams where they have that midseason lull and then they magically turn it on late or turn it on in the playoffs. And again, when you have the best player in the league, in LeBron James, you can do that. You have that luxury. And we've seen LeBron do that before. So, when you see the team playing the way that they were over the course of the last, 2-3 weeks, you can say to yourself, well, this could just be LeBron pacing himself, knowing that these games really don't matter. And he could kind of just flip the switch and turn it on for himself and for the rest of the team. But to see them go and ship off, and obviously the big name is Isaiah Thomas because, look, Isaiah Thomas has had a rough last year. He goes from being the toast of Boston and then loses his sister in a tragic car accident. The next day he's playing in a playoff game for the Celtics. He's carrying that team on his shoulders. And when their run ends, what do? They turn around and trade him for Kyrie Irving. So, and then he's had his injury issues with his hip. It hasn't worked out for him in Cleveland. And, if you read reports, he's sort of been behind some of the discord in that locker room. So nonetheless, they ship him off to Los Angeles, to the Lakers in that trade for Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance. But, it's so funny because you're watching the night before the trade deadline. LeBron hits that step back fadeaway jumper at the buzzer to beat Minnesota. And he jumps into the arms of Chetty Osman. And he's celebrating all these teammates. And lo and behold, you're looking at Isaiah Thomas, almost desperately following him around, looking for a high five, but nothing. But, you saw this revitalized LeBron James. And all of a sudden, right there you saw, all right, you know what? He can do that on any given night. He does that when he chooses to do that. So, look, I before the trade deadline, if you were to ask me who do I see coming out of the East, if you were to ask 10 NBA fans who they saw coming out of the East, I think most would still say Cleveland, despite the way that Boston has looked like the more steady team, the more consistent team throughout the course of the season. But again, it's LeBron James, who's been to 7 straight finals. How do you bet against this guy at this point? Until the day comes that his team does not go to the NBA finals, then you could say that. But until then, he's deserved that right for you to bet on him to go back to the NBA finals, given what he's shown you in the past, that his teams could, cruise during parts of the season and turn it on late. But nonetheless, it was fun. It was exciting. The NBA does the trade deadline stuff better than any other league. I would say the NFL compares to the NBA when it comes to off-season free agency, because that's always fun. Again, you're following everything on Twitter. You're looking for the top writers, the Adrian Wojnarowskis, in the NFL case, a lot of the local writers, but you're always just waiting for that next tweet to show reports that so on and so forth is going to said team or whatever. But it's always exciting with the NBA, and it's a lot of fun. Obviously, the fan experience is cool too. Just given out, you're waiting on a tweet, and then how that one piece of information turns into something completely different, analysis, this within a span of minutes. But as far as the Knicks are concerned, it's been a relatively somber period for the Knicks, just given that 2 days before the trade deadline, you lose your franchise cornerstone in Kristaps Porzingis, who is estimated to be out 8 to 12 months with the ACL injury. So that does complicate matters because, for one, whether Porzingis was healthy or not, I have been of the opinion that this team needs another draft pick, that they need another good draft pick. And if that means not making the playoffs and striking it rich in the lottery, then that's what this team needs, because they are pieces away from ever really being a real contender. Look, the way that this league works, and we're seeing it now, other than what Miami was able to do when they got LeBron, they got Bosh to join Dwayne Wade. Other than that example, for the most part, an NBA team's success is predicated upon them building through the draft, having a solid core, and then, yes, you're adding via free agency or trades or what have you, but you need a core. You need a base. And that's something the Knicks haven't had in a very, very long time. So when you look at what they came into the season building towards, where you have Porzingis, and again, it's very frustrating and mind-boggling when you think about the Willy Hernangomez trade, because Hernangomez was one of those names that you mentioned when you're talking about the Knicks core. Like, you mentioned Porzingis, you mentioned Frank Ntilikina, obviously the 8th overall pick of the last draft. I mean, you even mentioned Ron Baker, right? Again, Ron Baker, undrafted, came in, showed you that hustle, that defensive grit, kind of earned his way onto the roster. So, okay, fine. You want to mention him? Fine. Young player, still moldable, give you those hustle minutes. And you mentioned Tim Hardaway. Obviously, you invested heavily in Tim Hardaway Jr. You drafted him. He went off to finishing school in Atlanta. You signed him to a big contract. So you're invested in him. So who is your core? Your core is Kristaps Porzingis. It's Frank Ntilikina. It's Tim Hardaway Jr. You can mention Ron Baker and some of the younger guys like Damian Dotson. And as we saw last night, we'll talk more about Luke Cornett, Isaiah Hicks, guys who the team is trying to see what they have. Young players that they've invested time in the G League. What do the Knicks have in them? But Willy Hernangomez was one of those players, and you had to be excited about what you saw last year. He finishes his rookie season not seeing a whole lot of minutes, but showing enough. He earned a place on the all-rookie team, first team. And coming into the season, I mean, if you read quotes from Jeff Hornacek, he specifically mentions Hernangomez that, when what the plan is for the season. And that is to give playing time to, again, Ntilikina, Porzingis, Hernangomez, and build around that. And then what do we see in the first couple of weeks? That Hernangomez can't even get off the bench. I mean, he's not playing at all. And if he's playing, it's sparing minutes towards the end of a game that's already been decided, or you're getting 2-3 minutes in a close game. And you're wondering to yourself, like, what is going on here? I mean, you could understand the first week or so, right? A coach is trying to teach a lesson. Maybe a player is not really busting it in practice. Maybe he's just not doing certain things on the floor. And the knock on Hernangomez has been that he's one-dimensional. He's really not much of a defensive player, which gives you limitations on the floor. When you have a starting center in Enes Kanter, who too is not exactly a defensive marvel, Kyle O'Quinn gives you a little bit more of a defensive presence, but Hernangomez, again, if you want to theorize, if you want to side with Jeff Hornacek, he didn't earn his time. He didn't earn his minutes. Now, if you want to take the other side of the argument, that this is a player, it's a young player who just came off an impressive rookie season. Not to mention a second-round pick who, in essence, you struck it big with. You could have said, well, that was Phil Jackson's vision. He saw in him what a lot of other teams did not. Philadelphia drafted him, and Phil Jackson and the Knicks traded for him. And that you, as an organization, owe it to yourself to see what you have in a second-year player. But look, it does seem to be a head-scratcher of a move, because conventional wisdom would suggest that, especially when a player like Kristaps Porzingis goes down, and it opens up an opportunity for you to see what you have in a Willy Hernangomez, and you turn around and trade him the next day, instead of playing him for the remainder of the season, seeing what you have, seeing if you could build up his trade value. It suggests that there may be more to this conversation that we're not being told. Keep in mind, he did request a trade. So, as I mentioned in the last podcast, which is available on YouTube under Nick FM, that look, when you make a trade request, whether it comes bundled with, well, look, I want to play more, but if you're not going to give me the time, I want to go somewhere where I can play more. It is a trade request. However you want to embellish it, it's a trade request. When you make a trade request, the subtle message that you're sending to the rest of your team is that you're not all in, is that you're not fully invested in the team. Yes, every player that sits on a bench, on an NBA bench, thinks they belong on the floor. That's part and parcel of making it to the NBA. Because when you make it to the NBA, that means, growing up as a youth, you were the best in your youth league. Your high school or club team, you were by far the best on your high school or club team. College, or in Hernangomez's case, in the pros, in Europe, you were a player that was looked at as a pro prospect. So everyone around you, from the time that you were maybe 5 years old up until your, late teens, early 20s, is telling you you're awesome. Oh my God, you're awesome. You're the best. You're going to be in the NBA. You're going to be great. So when you make it to the NBA and you're not playing, obviously you're going to be frustrated, because all your life you've been told you're great. And then in your first year, you make the all-rookie team. So there's no reason to think that you shouldn't be playing. And as a competitor, you should want to have that mindset. So not faulting Hernangomez for thinking that, but a lot of players think that. What I am saying is, I'm giving you one slight, maybe justification for why the Knicks may have thought, look, if that's how you think, if that's how you feel, and that's what you're putting out there, then you know what? Maybe this isn't a good match for us. Maybe this isn't a good fit for what we're trying to build here. Again, it does seem like a head scratcher of a move. When you have a league that is getting younger and younger, and you have a young talent, a second-year talent, who possesses the kind of footwork in the low post that you desire in a center, who has a natural scoring ability that you desire in a center, who has natural rebounding ability that you desire in a center, it seems a bit odd that you would just trade that kind of a player at the lowest point of his value. And, instead of holding on to him thinking, what, maybe at some point, if we are to make a marquee trade, a big splash, right? You mentioned in the last podcast, why do you hold on to that first round pick? You hold on to that first round pick because of situations that took place 2 days ago with Porzingis going down. Now you have to, invest that pick into something big, because look, Porzingis going down, this team might not win another 5 games all season long. They are headed to the lottery. Now, where they are going to be positioned in the lottery is going to be important, because this is a deep and talented draft. And this team is pieces away. But now, if you can get yourself a marquee draft pick, that's going to help. But what if the scenario presents itself that a Damian Lillard who maybe finds himself just not wanting to stay in the Western Conference. Maybe he just wants out of Portland. He's available for a trade. Okay, yes, the Knicks have a first-round pick as a potential asset to trade to Portland for Damian Lillard. But you're going to tell me that someone like a Willy Hernangomez wouldn't be another attractive piece that you could add to a trade package to send to Portland for a Damian Lillard, for a true difference maker? So that's why, in general, I was opposed to sending a first or sending, Ntilikina. Rather sending a first. If Charlotte would have been okay with a package surrounding Frank Ntilikina and a couple of other players without sending a first, obviously I'd be okay with it. But I wasn't too crazy about sending a first-round pick for Kemba Walker. I would be willing to do that for Damian Lillard. But you look at yesterday with the trade deadline, and obviously a lot has gone on. Porzingis' injury, the departure of Willy Hernangomez for 2 future second-round picks. The Knicks made a very low-risk and potentially high-reward move yesterday in trading for Emmanuel Mudiay. You think back to the 2015 NBA draft and all the mock drafts and what is it that the Knicks fans want with that 4th overall pick. The consensus seemed to be that if some way, somehow, D'Angelo Russell or Jahlil Okafor fall to number 4, that's who we were going to draft. But all the mock drafts had Karl Anthony Towns going number 1, which he did, D'Angelo Russell going number 2, or Jahlil Okafor going number 2, and vice versa for the number 3. The 4 spot where the Knicks resided was kind of a mystery. Some had Justice Winslow going there. Some had Emmanuel Mudiay going there. If you think back to those mock drafts, Porzingis was, in the 7-8 range. Some had him at 10. Because, again, nobody had really seen him. Other than the international scouts, the NBA international analysts, you really haven't gotten much of a taste for what Porzingis was. So that's why he was booed when he was picked, because nobody knew a thing about him, and it seemed like a bit of a reach, given where most fans saw him on mock drafts. And a lot of fans, had you asked, once Karl Anthony Towns was drafted, once D'Angelo Russell was drafted, and once Jahlil Okafor was drafted, if you had surveyed 10 Knicks fans as far as who you wanted the Knicks to take with the 4th pick, I think those 2 names, Justice Winslow and Emmanuel Mudiay, were the ones that you were hearing the most. Not to say that anybody was particularly overly excited about them, but it was more like, okay, we've heard so much about them. And this Mudiay kid, he was recruited by Larry Brown at SMU, and then he, went to play professionally in China, and, apparently he's got good size for a point guard. And, then you look at Jahlil Okafor, who we did get to see, or rather, Justice Winslow, who we did get to see in the NCAA tournament, a very solid college player, and he had the makeup of a 10 to 12 year NBA veteran player, right? Just plays the game with great hustle, great defensive intensity, has the intangibles, ability to score inside. So I think Knicks fans would have been fine with those 2 picks. We fast forward to now. The Knicks send Doug McDermott, who was going to be a free agent at the end of the season. So really, you're not losing anything there. He had been in a horrific shooting slump over the last few weeks. He provided some exciting moments at the beginning of the season, but you knew what the situation was going to be with McDermott. That, look, if he comes in and he provides an instant impact, then yeah, he was going to get paid this offseason, and you didn't know if that was going to be by the Knicks or by somebody else. But he showed you some good things. But again, you're not going to lose sleep over trading him, especially trading him for somebody that was I believe it was Mudiay was 6 or 7 picked by Denver, top 10 pick 2 years ago. And you trade a second round pick that goes to Denver. So Doug McDermott goes to Dallas, and a Knicks second-round pick goes to Denver. And in return, you get a 21-year-old point guard in Emmanuel Mudiay, who is in his third year, and his first 2 years. So again, keep in mind, you still have him under control till the end of next year. This is a second chance for him. He spent his first 2 years in Denver as a starter. But now, with the emergence, of Jamal Murray, who we saw devastate the Knicks about a couple of weeks ago, and Gary Harris, he kind of took a back seat. First 2 years of his career, first 2 years in Denver, he was a starter. This year, coming off the bench. First 2 years, averaging 31 minutes a game. This year, averaging 17 minutes a game. Obviously, again, coming off the bench. His career averages, he averages just over 11 points a game, just over 4 assists a game. And the characteristics, described of Emmanuel Mudiay is that he's a penetrator, very athletic, very long, has potential to be a good defender, potential to be a good perimeter defender, but really has struggled on the defensive end. And he has struggled shooting the ball, which, again, in today's NBA, it's almost a prerequisite that you have to be able to set up your own shot. And, the hope is that the Knicks are going to be able to tap some of that unrealized potential that Mudiay has. Obviously, you're going to start to see comparisons between him and Frank Ntilikina, and then you're also going to start to see, okay, well, how can the Knicks have these two coexist, either playing together or playing separately? How are you going to get them the minutes? It is a conundrum, because if you think about the profile of Mudiay and the profile of Ntilikina, Mudiay, 21 years old, good penetrator, good playmaker, lacks on the defensive end, lacks in the shooting area, and shooting department. Ntilikina has shown you good defensive ability, so again, that is a major plus. He can be a playmaker when he chooses to be one, but his instincts are to be more of a team player in a sense, right? He brings the ball across the floor, and it seems like his first instinct is to get rid of the ball. Earlier in the season, when he was playing well, in concert with Porzingis, there were sparks, there were flashes where you saw, all right, he'd have those, smart hockey passes where, fine, even if he didn't have the definitive assist, he would set the offense up where they would get that definitive assist. And he made some plays on his own. But again, you have to understand what he is and what you don't know of his development. We know that he is a good on-ball defender. He's a good perimeter defender. He's lacked in shooting. He's lacked in deciding to be a playmaker. And he's lacked in understanding the difference of the American game. Keep in mind, Ntilikina, raised in France, playing under the European style of basketball, which is a lot more team-oriented, coming over here at age 19, learning a new culture, learning a new style of play. There is an adjustment. He's shown you things that you do need in an NBA player, in the fact that he is a good perimeter defender, which really, something you don't want to take for granted, because when you think about historically, the Knicks have been one of the worst teams in NBA history when it comes to defending the perimeter, when it comes to defending the other team's point guard. And you know what? If that alone is what Ntilikina gives you, at least you've bulked up in that area. But the problem is, now how do you supplement that? How do you now build around that? Because, okay, fine, you have someone who could play on-ball defense, but if he's not going to be able to facilitate the offense, then what are you doing, to facilitate the offense? What are you doing to create shots from the point guard position? And again, the Knicks are going to have, a lot of juggling to do. Jeff Hornacek is going to have to do a lot of juggling, because now you have 4 point guards on the roster. You just acquired Emmanuel Mudiay, who, look, you don't know what he is. You saw flashes, you saw impressive play over the first 2 years, and then you saw a player that really declined this year. Now, granted, he had 2 other guards supplant him, but this is going to be a second opportunity for him. And what you're hoping for as a Knicks fan is that a player in his position sees this as an opportunity, sees this as a chance to have sort of a fresh beginning for a team, for a franchise that traditionally has been point guard starved. I mean, starved. I mean, quality point guard play is still trying to find their identity at that position. You have a great opportunity. Yes, Frank Ntilikina is there, but you have to think to yourself, yes, he's 19 years old. Yes, he's still new to the American game. But if the Knicks were fully convinced that Frank Ntilikina was going to be their guy right now at this point in time, not at the beginning of the season when they had a chance to get Eric Bledsoe, I'm talking about now. If they were convinced he is 100% your point guard of the future, would they make this deal? I don't know. You could always make the argument that this is the kind of deal that, look, the opportunity presented itself. It is a very low-risk move. You moved a player who you probably weren't going to sign this offseason in Doug McDermott, and you sent a second-round pick. And in return, you get a guy who is a top 10 draft pick from 2 years ago, who still has an opportunity to grow into a credible NBA player. So, again, it's a low-risk move, and you'll see what you get. Because this year, you've seen Jarrett Jack have the lion's share at the point guard position. And at the beginning of the season, look, I mean, he's an older player. It's a veteran player. He's provided great leadership, guidance, shown, some of the younger players how it is to be a professional in the NBA. All around, bringing Jarrett Jack aboard has been a great thing for the Knicks. But over the last few weeks, those legs have gotten a little heavy. He's not the 26-year-old Jarrett Jack who played in Toronto and terrorized the Knicks anymore. This is an older, more wiser, I guess, version of Jarrett Jack. And, at this stage of the season and where the Knicks are, you have to stick to a plan of development, of developing younger players. And, at some point, you have to see a major reduction in Jarrett Jack's minutes. You have to see what you have in Emmanuel Mudiay. You have to see what you have in Frank Ntilikina. Frank Ntilikina, who, by the way, came out and said he's been battling with some quad issues, and that's why he's taken a bit of a step back. Again, you can mention injuries, you can mention fatigue, you can mention that, again, it's a lot to handle for a young player, 19 years old, coming over to America, playing against the best in the world. It's not an easy adjustment, and at times you are going to hit a rookie wall. Rookies hit a wall, and when you're carrying the load that he's carrying, it's a heavy load. So, but you still need to see what you have in him. You still need to see what you have in Trey Burke. Trey Burke is a great example of how the Knicks used the G League to develop a player. Trey Burke is another reclamation project. 2013, he was the College Player of the Year, the National College Player of the Year, teammate of Tim Hardaway Jr. A top 10 pick by Utah. Didn't quite pan out. He has a second leash on his NBA career here with the Knicks. He has a second opportunity here with the Knicks. And you want to see a player like that go out there and he has a second opportunity here with the Knicks. And look, he tore it up in the G League. G League is a different world. I mean, there's a very fine line between, a G League player, a top G League player, and an NBA player. Sometimes it doesn't make sense by the numbers. Sometimes it's just, are you a specialist? Are you strictly a rebounder? Are you strictly a three-point shooter? Are you strictly a penetrator? Or are you someone who just needed more development to, develop an overall game in the G League to come up to the NBA? It's an inexact science. It's a very inexact science. But Trey Burke was tearing it up in the G League. He was a second leading scorer. And he's come up and shown you some good things. But the problem is, with the Knicks, with the guards at least, everything we've seen has been in a small sample size. Trey Burke, whatever we've seen out of him, limited minutes. Frank Ntilikina. Now, granted, again, if you want to take his leg injury into consideration, what we've seen out of him lately, limited minutes. And you wonder now how Jeff Hornacek is going to juggle this point guard rotation, because you have 4 guards, one of them a veteran, and 3 of them young, developing point guards, 2 of which are 21 and 19. That is going to be a key factor going forward for the Knicks, but that is the extent of what they did in yesterday's trade deadline. So we'll see. We'll see how Emmanuel Mudiay is going to continue his development, how he's going to view this second opportunity with the Knicks, and we're going to see if the Knicks can develop a point guard. We bring up the Jets, right? And if the Jets should draft a quarterback, the big question is, can they develop a quarterback? Do they have the right personnel to develop a quarterback? Well, again, point guard is your quarterback. And I think there are some unanswered questions as far as whether the Knicks have the personnel if Jeff Hornacek can develop a point guard. So that's yet to be seen. And again, we'll have answers soon. We'll see if Jeff Hornacek is going to be around for next season. But he at least has the remainder of this season, past the All-Star break. And we'll see what happens. We'll see who emerges. We'll see this competition between Emmanuel Mudiay, Frank Ntilikina, Trey Burke, and we'll see who emerges. Hopefully, we see someone seize an opportunity, a great opportunity, and come forward. But I wanted to bring up last night's game, Knicks in Toronto, and look, there really isn't much to talk about. They got blown out by the Raptors in Toronto. Michael Beasley with the game high, I believe 21 points. And, this is where, at this point of the season, look, you didn't trade Courtney Lee, you didn't trade Kyle O'Quinn, you didn't trade Michael Beasley, you didn't trade Enes Kanter. In the last podcast, I mentioned how Enes Kanter is a player that I do view as part of the core, as part of the long-term solution for this team. So I would retain him at the end of the season. I would give him a contract at the end of the season because I think he is the kind of player that you do want to have around your young players. And that's not to say anything bad about Courtney Lee, Kyle O'Quinn, or Michael Beasley, but I feel as if, especially in the case of Michael Beasley, this team is not making the playoffs. That much is certain. This team, the development is the priority. The development of the young players is the priority. And whether you want to admit it or not, this team has to put themselves in a prime position to get a prime lottery pick. There are no two ways about it. But with Michael Beasley, you understand that this is a player who is going to take a lot of shots, which for a contending team, that's great. For a team trying to get to the playoffs, that's great. For the Knicks earlier on in the season, when they're pulling off upset wins over Cleveland, playing some of the most exciting basketball in the NBA, if Michael Beasley is going off and having 30-point games, that too is great. But this phase where the Knicks are at now, you cannot have Michael Beasley taking lion's share of the shots. You need to see your younger players take some shots. They need to be moving the ball around. They need to have the ball. They need to be put in positions where they're accountable for what the Knicks are doing on the floor. And that's just one example. Again, a player like Damian Dotson, I don't even know if Damian Dotson is going to be an NBA player after his rookie deal runs out, which is partially guaranteed through next year. But I want to find out what Damian Dotson has, because if you think back to his college career coming out of Houston, he was a great three-point shooter in college. And I know that doesn't always necessarily translate at the NBA level, but that's just one example of a player that you want to see him put in positions where you could see, all right, wow, this guy, when kind of put out there, to take some shots. He's hitting shots. He's making the right plays. Or he's making the mistakes, but he's learning from them. And I think that's what fans want to see now. Fans want to see these young players put out on the floor and put in situations where they now have to run the show. The one brightest spot to emerge from last night's game, or last night's drubbing at the hand of the Raptors, is Luke Kornet. I don't know what Luke Kornet's future is in the NBA with the Knicks or what have you. But last night, what did you see? You saw a player that spent the season, again, Kornet is a two-way player, played, with Westchester of the G League. 11 points, 10 rebounds, the first double-double since the first Knicks rookie or debutant to make his NBA debut and get a double-double since 1996. John Wallace. Remember John Wallace out of Syracuse? That's the first player. So 1996 now, 22 years. First player in 22 years to debut as a Knick and getting a double-double, and he had 4 blocks. This guy was knocking down three-pointers. And in today's modern NBA game, someone of his height, he's 7 feet tall, and he's knocking down 3-point shots. That's a valuable commodity. So, look, it's going to be interesting to see how Jeff Hornacek is going to now balance the younger players with these older veterans. And, I mean, look, I don't know how the Knicks want to approach it. They're saying all the right things. Right? They're always going to say that they want to make the playoffs. But you have to be a realist. You have to realize this team is not going to make the playoffs and that they're pieces away from having a core that one day is going to be, a complete picture and trying to move forward and trying to move their way up the Eastern Conference. Obviously, Porzingis getting hurt throws a wrench in that. You're going to hold your breath and you're going to hope that, all the care that he's going to receive with the Knicks medical staff, with the hospital for special surgery. And again, you're in New York City, so you hope that, with some of the best doctors in the world, that Porzingis is going to have, the kind of recovery that he requires. And that, again, in this time off that he's going to have, 8 to 12 months, maybe he does take a step back and just, view the game from a different perspective. And maybe he picks up a thing or two. Maybe he gets in the weight room and adds a few pounds, bulks up that frame of his a little bit. But I'm not ready to write off a 22-year-old. I know a lot of people show real concern that, he might never come back this season. He's 22 years old. So, again, biggest takeaways from yesterday, you get a top 10 first-round pick from 2015, Emmanuel Mudiay, 21 years old, for a very low-risk proposition. You see the emergence of 2 young players last night in Luke Kornet and Isaiah Hicks. And now the question going forward is how Jeff Hornacek is going to handle the rotation, how he's going to better incorporate these younger players, give them more minutes, give them more opportunities. Because I'll tell you what the last thing you want to see as a Knicks fan, and is what happened last year, where the team, when you look at the mock drafts and where a team is slotted in the NBA lottery ranking, they're in one spot. But then you have Maurice and Dor going off for career games and bumping them up, or rather down a spot or two in the lottery order, and lo and behold, they get the 8th overall pick instead of the 7th overall pick. Look, if you're going to tell me that someone like a Luke Kornet goes off and has a 26-point game and he's just raining threes, shooting over whoever's guarding him, and the Knicks win a game, I'll be happy. If you're going to tell me that Frank Ntilikina or Emmanuel Mudiay, something, the light switch goes off in their head and they have this crazy, 16-point, 13-assist game, and the Knicks win a game, and it's exciting. The Garden's going crazy watching this stripped-down Knicks team win a game over a good team, I'll be happy. But if you're going to tell me that the Knicks won a 95-93 win over the Philadelphia 76ers and Michael Beasley put on a show going going off for 38 points and Courtney Lee added 23, then really, what do you gain out of that? What do you gain out of that? Yay. All right. Next one a game. Jeopardize their lottery position because Michael Beasley and Courtney Lee, who may or may not be on the team going forward, decided to go off. I don't see the point. I don't see the benefit. I don't see the value in that. This is Nick FM. We're going to be launching a website real soon, so if you want to be involved, we're going to be putting out our contact information soon. We want to create an interactive platform for Knicks fans. People want to come in, talk topics relevant to the Knicks, advanced topics relevant to the Knicks, provide solid analysis. We're going to be soon adding video, allowing others to come on and voice their opinions as well. So it's going to be a good time, and we're hoping it's going to be a good experience for all Knicks fans.